In this video, we will explore the subgraph functionality. To set the scene, consider this simple query. It returns individuals who are members of some entities. Let's also create another query that will return all entities connected to other entities through invested in connection. And now, effectively, we get two subgraphs on the canvas. So each of them have been returned from a different query. Say we now want to find out if there are any connection between the result of those two queries. How can we do it? Well, one of the approaches to answer that question is to turn each of these queries into subgraphs and connect them together. So let's do that. To turn a query into a subgraph, use this little block with 3 dots. So here I've just turned the first query into a subgraph, and now I'll copy this across and recreate the second query and connect the two together. The last information we need to specify is the type of connection we are interested to uncover between those two clusters. Here we'll use the any block. And when we run this query, we get two direct connections between Mike and Big Back Management and Jessica and Business Incubator. So far, I've run each query one after the other and kept the result on the canvas between queries. So this is why we are getting the full picture, even though, strictly speaking, only those nodes match our full query. So if I now clear the canvas and run the full query at once and select Show Subgraph, we get all the nodes matching both the primary and the subqueries. The 3 individuals that were members of entities but had no direct connection to entities that have invested in other entities are not being returned. We can further narrow down the resulting graph if we don't ask the system to show the subgraphs. In this case, the software will compute the subgraph in the background, but only visualize the node that both match the subgraph and the primary graph, like so. Here, those two individuals are part of this block, while those two companies are part of this block. Now, when dealing with subgraph, it is important to remember that the order of your subgraph matters. While the system will return all the nodes involved in a subgraph, when you select to show the subgraph, of course, only the nodes matching the block connected to the 3-dot block will be part of the primary query. To illustrate this, let's go back to our advanced search and use the subgraph looking at individuals being members of an entity. In this order, the query will return only the individuals. However, if we change the order of the query, we will only get the relevant entities. This is important to remember, especially if you connect your subgraph to a primary query. Indeed, if we now add a clause to the primary query to connect the resulting nodes from the subgraph to any individual, we get different results depending on how the subgraph was built. The last concept we will see in this video is the ability to nest subgraph within other subgraph. Let's start with a simple query to see companies that buy planes. This query returns 3 matching companies. Using the subgraph block, we can now expand the query to see all the individuals that work for those companies. Next, we will nest this query, along with its subquery, into another subgraph. This time, we are looking for individuals connected to those workers through either familial or interpersonal relationship. Say, now we want to understand what other individuals are connected to the individual we have just identified through our last queries, at 2 degrees of separation. This returns a decent chunk of nodes, so it might be worth narrowing the list of individuals to be connected. Here again, we use the subgraph block and ask to only see individuals connected to entities through either financial, business, or functional connection. This reduces a little the dataset being returned. So let's go back to the advanced search window and further fine-tune the query by asking to only see individual connected to entity that produces plane. And now we have a much smaller result. And looking closely at it, we can map the return data against our query. Here we see the node matching the first batch of nested subgraph, while those nodes match the second part of the primary query. Finally, those nodes connect the 2 clusters between 1 and 2 levels of separation. In conclusion, nested queries are very powerful in helping you either expand or reduce your queries and the data being returned. However, they require careful attention when you build them in order to get the relevant insight. It is often easier to build those complex queries incrementally, as we did in this video, to ensure you are getting the information you are after at every step. However, once you've built those queries, you can save them and run them over and over again to see if your graph changes over time as new information is added to your knowledge base.